Evio.
Welcome back to The Devil's Ledger, your weekly accounting of the strange, the unsettling, and the things that refuse to stay buried. As the year winds down and the holidays settle in, this week's ledger leans into a familiar truth. Christmas has always had a shadow. So let's open the books. We start, as we always do, with the creepiest thing I heard this week. The Whistler Ski Lodge Poltergeist. So the creepiest thing I heard this week didn't come from a police blotter or a courtroom transcript. It came from a ski town, from a place that markets itself as pristine, athletic, aspirational, a place where the snow is powdery, the drinks are super expensive, and the views are so beautiful that they almost feel staged. So, Whistler, more specifically, one of its lodges. Now, before we get to the poltergeist, it helps to understand, where we're standing. Whistler Mountain, now inseparable from Whistler Blackcomb, wasn't always the global luxury destination that it is today. So long before gondolas and après-ski, this was dense forest pressed hard against rock and ice. The first non-indigenous settlers arrived in the early 20th century, drawn by logging and just isolation. Skiing came later, much later. In the 1960s, Whistler was still rough around the edges, a frontier resort trying to convince the world that it belonged on the same map as Aspen or St. Moritz. Lodges were built quickly, staff housing was really tight, winters were long, dark, and punishing. It wasn't a place for comfort yet. It was a place for endurance. And that matters, because old buildings tend to remember things. The lodge at the center of the story isn't marketed as haunted. There are no plaques, no themed ghost tours. Guests come for fireplaces and timber beams, not apparitions, which makes the accounts harder to dismiss because they don't come from thrill seekers. They come from staff, from housekeeping, from security, overnight security, front desk. And the first stories are always small. Doors that won't stay shut, even after maintenance checks the hinges. Lights flicking on in empty rooms. Radios turning themselves into static, heavy channels after midnight. The kinds of things people laugh off. Until they can't. One housekeeper reported returning to her room that she had just cleaned to find the bed stripped again. Sheets folded neatly on the floor, pillows stacked. No sign of a guest, no sign of entry, only a few minutes had passed. She assumed a colleague was playing a joke. Until it happened again, and again, always the same room. Another staff member, working late nights at the front desk, described hearing footsteps above him. Heavy, deliberate pacing, in a wing of the lodge that had been closed for renovation. So, he checked the security cameras. Nothing. No movement, no anomalies, but the footsteps continued anyway, crossing from one end of the hallway to the other, stopping only when he spoke out loud. "Hello," he said, and it would stop immediately. The most unsettling accounts, though, come from the upper floors. Now, guests have complained about being watched while they slept. Not the vague, half-dream sensation we all get sometimes in unfamiliar beds, but a specific feeling of presence near the foot of the mattress. And several describe the same detail, the impression of someone standing too close, leaning forward, like they were inspecting them. And one guest woke to the sound of breathing, slow and measured, right beside the bed. And when she turned on the lamp, the room was empty. The door was locked. The window was closed. She didn't sleep again that night. Poltergeist activity, by definition, isn't subtle. It's loud, it's physical, it's disruptive. And in this lodge, the disturbances escalate in winter, when the snow is the deepest, the nights are the longest, and the building is the most crowded. Staff talk about objects moving, chairs scraping across empty dining rooms after last call, glassware rattling in locked cabinets, elevators arriving on floors no one selected. There's no single tragic death pinned to the lodge, no neat story about a murdered guest or a wronged lover, which, oddly, makes the phenomenon feel even more authentic. Poltergeists don't always come from trauma. Sometimes they come from pressure, from repetition, from places where people pass through endlessly, leaving fragments of themselves behind. Some locals believe the activity is tied to the mountain itself. That Whistler, with its violent weather shifts and sheer vertical drops, it's always been a place where the line between calm and chaos is pretty thin. And that building on it, stacking warmth and light against cold and darkness, invites something to push back. Others think it's simpler: exhaustion, stress, seasonal workers living in half daylight, half in darkness, minds playing tricks in thin air. But that doesn't explain why so many people describe the same rooms, the same sounds, the same sensation of being observed. The creepiest detail, though, comes from a longtime night manager who eventually transferred to another property. He says the lodge doesn't feel empty when it's empty. He says there's a difference between quiet and occupied silence, and the building knows which one it's in. And sometimes late at night, when the snow is falling so hard it erases the world beyond the windows, the lodge feels alert, as if it's waiting for something or someone. And that's the creepiest thing I heard this week. All right, so this week on The Devil Within, we got a 2-part Christmas special. I decided that we're going to trade in the demons and the cults and the crimes for something arguably more disturbing. Christmas movies that scared the hell out of us, or, if didn't scare us, left us with a low-grade, existential dread that never quite went away. These aren't jump scare holiday flicks. They're the ones that made us uncomfortable as children without knowing why. Films that suggested Christmas isn't about joy or warmth at all, but obligation, isolation, regret, and the quiet terror of time passing, whether you're ready or not. What does it mean to be alone during a season designed for togetherness? What happens when nostalgia becomes a trap? And why do so many Christmas stories hinge on ghosts, reckonings, and moral debt? Turns out, Dickens understood something that we keep forgetting. The holidays are when the past comes calling. And this week on Criminal Mischief, we have a Christmas interlude. Carolyn Osorio steps away from murder and mystery and mischief just for a moment, and instead, she reads us The Velveteen Rabbit, the timeless Christmas tale about love, loss, and what it truly means to become real. There are no suspects, there are no timelines, no autopsies, just a story about being worn down by love until you're transformed by it. It's a pause, a breath, a reminder that tenderness and sorrow often arrive together, especially this time of year. If Criminal Mischief usually explores the darker corners of human behavior, this episode asks a quieter question. What survives us once we've been loved? This week on the Ides of April, we keep the Christmas theme going with a Christmas assassination. While most of the world was basking in Yuletide cheer, Grigory Rasputin was being invited to dinner, and then poisoned, and then shot, and then beaten. Oh, and then drowned. This week, the Ides of April delivers a juicy, blood-soaked Christmas assassination. The murder of Russia's most infamous mystic, whose death reads less like history and more like folklore that refuses to settle down. It's a story about power, superstition, empire, and the dangerous belief that killing one man could save a collapsing world. Spoiler, it didn't. If you've ever wondered why Christmas stories so often involve those ghosts or judgment or reckoning, Rasputin's End offers a chilling clue. This week on Taboo Treasures, the boys are taking the week off. No cursed objects, no forbidden relics, but they'll be back in the new year with more strange histories and dangerous things we probably shouldn't be touching. So rest up, gentlemen. We'll see you soon. This week in horror, we have 28 Years Later. Directed by the great Danny Boyle, 28 Years Later isn't trying to recreate the feral panic of the first 28 days later. Instead, it asks a colder question. What's left after the panic is over? And whether survival without hope is really survival at all. This is a bleaker, more mature return to the apocalypse. The rage is calcified into routine, and the horror isn't the infected anymore. It's endurance. The film is occasionally haunting, thoughtful in ways the genre doesn't always allow itself to be. Not always thrilling, but that might be the point. Because when the world doesn't end, when it just keeps going, terror changes shape. It becomes quieter and heavier, more familiar. If you're enjoying The Devil's Ledger and the shows across the Evio network, keep track of us. Follow, rate, and review The Devil's Ledger and all Evio Creative shows on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening right now. And share an episode with someone who likes their holidays just a little haunted. Feel free to reach out to us with thoughts, questions, or strange stories of your own at info@eviocreative.com. And explore the full Evio Creative slate at eviocreative.com, including The Devil Within, Criminal Mischief, The Ides of April, Taboo Treasures, and more shows coming in the new year. So, as this year comes to a close, we just want to say thank you for listening, for sharing, for letting these stories travel with you through dark roads, long nights, and quiet moments. And however you spend the holidays, surrounding by people, maybe alone with your thoughts, we're grateful you spent part of this year with us. We'll see you in the new year. Until then, just keep the lights on. The Devil's Ledger is an Evio production, recorded live at Bel Air Studios in Los Angeles, California. For The Devil's Ledger, I'm your writer and host, Brandon Morgan.